The morning, Garrett Young found an orc woman collapsed in his wheat field, bleeding from a wound that looked like it came from her own kind's weapon. He knew his quiet life on the frontier was about to change forever. He had been checking the irrigation channels when he spotted her, a dark shape among the golden stalks. At first, he thought it might be a deer or perhaps a wolf, but as he approached with his walking stick raised defensively, he saw the unmistakable green skin and the leather armor marked with symbols he did not recognize. She was face down in the dirt, one arm stretched out as if reaching for something beyond her grasp. Garrett hesitated. Every story he had ever heard about orcs painted them as raiders, killers, savages who burned villages and took heads as trophies. But this woman was unconscious, vulnerable, and losing blood from a deep gash across her back. The wound had the jagged pattern of an axe strike, and it was still seeping despite the makeshift bandage she had tried to apply herself. He looked around at the empty fields stretching toward the forest line. His nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. No one would know if he simply walked away and let nature take its course. That would be the safe choice, the sensible one. Instead, he knelt beside her and pressed his fingers to her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, steady but weak. Her skin was warm under his touch, and he could see now that she was younger than he had initially thought, perhaps close to his own 24 years. Her tusks were small and curved, barely protruding past her lower lip, and her black hair was braided in a complex pattern that had come partially undone. Garrett made his decision. He ran back to his house, grabbed a blanket and his medical supplies, and returned to haul her out of the field. She was heavy, solid muscle beneath the armor, and by the time he got her onto the blanket and dragged her toward his home, his shirt was soaked with sweat. His farmhouse was small but sturdy, built by his father before the fever took both his parents 3 years ago. Garrett had lived alone ever since, tending the fields and the small herd of goats, making occasional trips to the village of Millbrook to trade. It was a lonely existence, but it was peaceful, and after serving 2 years in the border militia, he had learned to value peace above almost everything. He cleared his kitchen table with one sweep of his arm, sending plates and letters clattering to the floor, then lifted the orc woman onto its surface. She groaned as he moved her, but did not wake. He cut away the torn leather of her armor and the shirt beneath, revealing the full extent of the wound. It was deep, running from her left shoulder blade down to her right side, and he could see that infection had already begun to set in around the edges. Garrett worked quickly, drawing on the field medicine he had learned in the militia. He cleaned the wound with boiled water and the last of his precious alcohol, then applied a poultice of herbs his mother had taught him to make. The orc woman stirred several times during the process, muttering words in a language he did not understand, but she never fully woke. By the time he finished stitching the wound closed with careful, even strokes, the sun was setting. He covered her with a clean blanket, moved her carefully to his bed, and then collapsed into the chair by the hearth, too exhausted to even think about eating. He woke in the night to the sound of movement in his bedroom. Garrett grabbed the knife he had left on the table and approached cautiously. In the dim light of the dying fire, he could see the orc woman sitting up in bed, her yellow eyes wide and alert, one hand clutching the blanket to her chest. "Easy," he said, keeping his voice low and calm. "You are safe here. I found you in my field and you were hurt." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke in accented but clear common. "You are human." "I am." "Why did you help me?" Her voice was rough, as if she had not used it in days. Garrett lowered the knife but did not put it down. "You were dying. I could not just leave you there." "Most humans would have." She shifted, wincing at the pain in her back. Most humans would have finished what my kin started. Your own people did that to you." She looked away, jaw tight. "I made choices that my clan did not agree with. When I refused to recant, they cast me out. The wound was a reminder that I am no longer welcome among them." Garrett set the knife on the windowsill and lit a candle. In the better light, he could see her face more clearly. She had strong features, a broad nose and high cheekbones. There was a scar above her left eyebrow and another along her jaw. Her eyes were the color of amber, and they watched him with a mixture of suspicion and exhaustion. "What is your name?" he asked. She seemed to consider whether to answer. Finally, she said, "Thraka. Daughter of Gruk, formerly of the Stonefist clan. I am Garrett Young. This is my land, such as it is. You can stay until you are healed enough to travel." "Why would you do this for me?" he shrugged, suddenly feeling self-conscious under her intense gaze. "Like I said, I could not just leave you to die. Whatever your people think of you, whatever my people might think of you, you are still a person who needs help." Thraka studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, slowly. "I am in your debt, Garrett Young." "Let us worry about that when you can stand without falling over," he said. "For now, you need to rest. Do you want water?" "Food." "Water," she said. He brought her a cup from the kitchen, and she drank it in 3 long swallows. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed, and Garrett felt an odd jolt at the contact. He pulled his hand back quickly. "I will sleep out here," he said, gesturing to the main room. "Call if you need anything." She lay back down without another word, and he returned to his chair by the hearth, wrapping himself in a spare blanket. Sleep was a long time coming. Over the next few days, Garrett fell into a strange new routine. He woke early to tend the animals and check the fields, then came back to change Thraka's bandages and bring her meals. She was a difficult patient, insisting on trying to help despite her injury, but he was firm with her, and eventually, she accepted that she needed to rest. They spoke little at first. Thraka seemed uncomfortable with idle conversation, and Garrett was not sure what to say to an orc woman who was living in his house. But slowly, as the days passed, they began to share small pieces of their lives. He learned that Thraka had been a warrior in her clan, trained from childhood in combat and survival. She had been good at it, respected even, until she began to question the raids on human settlements. She had seen too many children killed, too many homes burned for no reason other than old hatred. When she refused to participate in an attack on a farming village, her father had given her one last chance to prove her loyalty. She refused again, and he had struck her down himself. Garrett told her about his parents, about the farm, about his time in the militia. He told her about the orc raids he had helped defend against, about the friends he had lost. He watched her face when he spoke of these things, but she did not flinch or look away. She simply listened, her expression grave. "I am sorry," she said when he finished, "for what my people have done to yours." "And I am sorry for what my people have done to yours," he replied. "I have seen human soldiers do things that haunt me still. This war between our kinds, it has no winners, only survivors." She nodded, and something in her eyes softened. "You are not what I expected a human to be." "What did you expect?" "I do not know. Fear, hatred, cruelty." She gestured around the simple room. "Not this, not kindness from a stranger." Garrett felt his face grow warm. "Well, I am just a farmer. Maybe I am too simple to know better." "I do not think you are simple at all," Thraka said quietly. By the end of the first week, Thraka was able to walk around the house without assistance. Garrett showed her where everything was, though he insisted she still needed to avoid any heavy work. She chafed at the restriction but did not argue. Instead, she began to help in small ways, mending his clothes with a needle and thread she found in a drawer, organizing his chaotic kitchen shelves, and even attempting to cook a meal. though the results were nearly inedible. "What is this?" Garrett asked, poking at the charred lump on his plate. "Porridge," Thraka said defensively. "It is what my clan ate most mornings. Your clan must have had stronger stomachs than I do." He smiled to show he was teasing, and after a moment she smiled back. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it transformed her face, making her look younger and less burdened. "Perhaps I am better at fighting than cooking," she admitted. "Perhaps," he agreed. "Here, let me show you how I make it." They stood side by side at the stove, and Garrett walked her through the process of making a simple porridge with oats, milk, and honey. Thraka watched intently, asking questions about each step. Her arm brushed against his as she stirred the pot, and Garrett found himself very aware of her presence, of the warmth radiating from her body and the faint scent of the soap she had used to wash her hair. He stepped back, suddenly flustered. "That should do it. Let it simmer for a few more minutes." "Thank you," she said, not looking at him, "for teaching me." "It is nothing," he said, though his heart was beating faster than it should. That night, as Garrett lay on the floor in his makeshift bed, he admitted to himself that his feelings toward Thraka were becoming complicated. She was not what he had expected. She was fierce and proud, yes, but also thoughtful and surprisingly gentle. When she spoke, she chose her words carefully, and when she listened, she gave her full attention. He found himself looking for excuses to spend time with her, to hear her voice, to see that rare smile. It was foolish, he told himself. She would leave as soon as she was healed, and he would return to his quiet life. There was no future in whatever he was feeling. Humans and orcs did not build lives together. The very idea was absurd, but his heart did not seem to care about absurdity. Thraka, for her part, was equally troubled. She had spent her entire life being taught that humans were weak, deceitful creatures who deserved no mercy. Yet Garrett Young had shown her nothing but mercy. He had saved her life, tended her wounds, fed her, and asked for nothing in return. He worked from dawn to dusk on his farm, and in the evenings he sat by the fire and read books or whittled small figures from wood. He was gentle with his animals, patient with her questions, and he laughed easily at his own mistakes. She found herself watching him when he was not looking, studying the way his hands moved as he worked, the furrow of concentration on his brow, the way his hair fell into his eyes when he bent over a task. He was not built like an orc warrior, all bulk and intimidation, but there was a quiet strength in him that she respected. He did not boast or posture. He simply did what needed to be done. It confused her. It frightened her. And more than anything, it made her feel things she had no words for. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after she had arrived, Thraka was well enough to venture outside. Garrett took her on a tour of the farm, showing her the wheat fields that stretched toward the forest, the vegetable garden his mother had planted years ago, the goat pen, where 6 shaggy animals bleated at their approach. "They are loud," Thraka observed, watching as the goats jostled for position at the fence. "They are always loud," Garrett agreed. "But they are good company and they provide milk and cheese. Here, this one is friendly." He opened the gate and led her to a brown and white goat that immediately butted its head against his leg. "This is Clover. She is the leader of the herd." Thraka reached out tentatively and touched Clover's head. The goat regarded her with unimpressed amber eyes, then allowed the petting. Thraka laughed, a genuine sound of delight that made Garrett's chest tighten. "I have never touched a goat before," she said. "We did not keep animals in my clan, only hunting dogs. You are welcome to spend time with them whenever you like," Garrett said. "They are good listeners, though their advice is usually terrible." She laughed again, and the sound was like music. They walked to the edge of his property, where the wheat fields gave way to wildflowers and tall grass. The forest loomed in the distance, dark and dense. Thraka stared at it for a long time, her expression unreadable. "What will you do when you are fully healed?" Garrett asked, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. "I do not know," she said. "I cannot return to my clan. Other clans would not accept me, not after I was cast out. I could try to live alone in the wilderness, but that is a hard life, even for a warrior." "You could stay here," Garrett said before he could stop himself. "I mean, if you wanted to. There is plenty of work and I could use the help. The farm is more than one person can manage well." She turned to look at him, her yellow eyes searching his face. "You would let me stay? Even though I am an orc, you are Thraka," he said simply. "That is all that matters to me." Her expression softened, and for a moment he thought she might say yes. Then she looked away, her jaw tightening. "Your neighbors would not understand. They would drive me away or worse. I cannot bring that trouble to you, Garrett." "Let me worry about my neighbors," he said. "Just think about it. You do not have to decide now." She nodded, but she did not say anything more, and they walked back to the house in silence. That night, Thraka could not sleep. She lay in Garrett's bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about his offer. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to grab hold of this unexpected kindness and never let go. But another part, the part that had been trained as a warrior, warned her that staying would only lead to pain. For both of them. She rose quietly and walked to the main room where Garrett was asleep in his chair, a book open on his lap. He looked peaceful, his face relaxed in a way it never was during the day. She found herself kneeling beside him, studying his features in the firelight. He was handsome, she realized. Not in the way orc men were handsome, all brutal strength and intimidating presence, but in a softer way. There was kindness in his face and honesty. She wondered what it would be like to stay here, to wake up every morning in this house, to work beside him in the fields, to share meals and stories and quiet evenings by the fire. She wondered what it would be like to be loved by a man like Garrett Young. The thought startled her so much that she pulled back, her heart racing. She could not think such things. It was impossible, forbidden. And yet she could not deny the truth of it. She cared for him, more than cared. She was falling in love with him, and the realization terrified her. She returned to the bedroom and did not sleep for the rest of the night. The following days were tense. Thraka avoided being alone with Garrett, busying herself with tasks around the farm. He noticed the change but did not comment on it, though she could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes. She hated herself for causing him pain, but she did not know what else to do. Then, on a morning that started like any other, everything changed. Garrett was in the barn, milking the goats, when he heard voices outside. He frowned and set down the pail, stepping out into the sunlight. 3 men on horseback were approaching the house, and he recognized them immediately. They were from Millbrook: Thomas Yates, the blacksmith, Robert Yates, his younger brother, and Marcus Young, a distant cousin of Garrett's who had never liked him much. "Garrett," Thomas called out as they reined in their horses. "We need to talk to you." Garrett walked toward them, unease prickling at the back of his neck. "What is this about?" "We heard a rumor in the village," Thomas said, his face grim. "They say you have been harboring an orc on your property." Garrett's stomach dropped. "Where did you hear that?" "Old Samuel saw you dragging something out of your field a few weeks back," Robert said. "He came to town and told folks he thought it might have been an orc. We did not believe him at first, but then you stopped coming to the village market and, well, here we are." "You need to understand, Garrett," Marcus said, leaning forward in his saddle. "If there is an orc here, we cannot just let it go. Not after what they did to the Harrison family last spring. Not after all the blood they have spilled." "She is not a raider," Garrett said, his voice sharp. She was cast out by her own clan for refusing to attack humans. She was dying when I found her and I helped her. That is all. That is all. Thomas looked incredulous. Garrett, you are sheltering the enemy. Do you have any idea what people will say, what they will do? I do not care what they say, Garrett shot back. She has done nothing wrong. She is an orc, Marcus shouted. That is wrong enough. The door to the house opened and Thraka stepped out. She had armed herself with a knife from the kitchen, and her posture was defensive, ready for violence. The three men tensed, their hands moving to their weapons. Thraka, no, Garrett said, moving quickly to place himself between her and the riders. Go back inside. I will not hide while they threaten you, she said, her voice cold. There is no threat here, Thomas said, though his hand remained on his sword hilt. We just came to talk. You came armed and in numbers, Thraka said. That is not talking, that is intimidation. Listen to her, Robert muttered. She speaks common like she has lived among us. How long has she been spying on the village? She is not a spy. Garrett was almost shouting now. She is a person just like you, and she deserves to be treated with respect. Respect, Marcus spat on the ground. You have lost your mind, cousin. That thing in your house is a monster, and you are a traitor for protecting it. Thraka moved so fast that Garrett barely saw her. One moment she was behind him, and the next she was standing in front of Marcus's horse, her knife pressed to the animal's neck. Call me a thing again, she said, her voice deadly calm. See what happens. The horse whinnied and stamped, and Marcus struggled to control it. Get away from my horse, you savage. Thraka, please, Garrett said, his heart pounding. This is not helping. She looked at him, and he saw the pain in her eyes, the old wounds reopening. Then she lowered the knife and stepped back. You are right, I should go. No, Garrett said. You are not going anywhere. I am bringing trouble to you just as I feared, she said. These men are here because of me. How long before the whole village comes? How long before they burn your house with both of us inside? That is not going to happen, Garrett said desperately. I will not let it. You cannot stop it, Thraka said. She turned to the three men. I will leave by sunset, you have my word. But if you try to harm Garrett Young for his kindness, I will return, and I will show you what an orc warrior can truly do. Thomas held up his hands. No one is harming anyone. We just wanted to know the truth. If you leave willingly, that will be the end of it. Thraka, Garrett said, but she was already walking back to the house. The three men rode away, and Garrett followed Thraka inside, his mind racing. She was in the bedroom, gathering her few possessions into a leather pack that he had given her. You do not have to do this, he said from the doorway. Yes, I do, she said without looking at him. You said I could stay, and I wanted to believe you, but you see now what that means. Your own people will turn against you. I will not let that happen. I do not care if they turn against me, Garrett said. I care about you. She froze, her hands stilling on the pack. Slowly, she turned to face him. What did you say? I care about you, he repeated, stepping into the room. These past few weeks, having you here, it has been the happiest I have been since my parents died. You make me laugh. You challenge me. You make this place feel like a home again instead of just a house. I do not want you to go, Thraka. Garrett, she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. You cannot say these things. Why not? They are true. Because it does not matter if they are true. She turned away, her shoulders shaking. Even if I stayed, even if your neighbors learned to tolerate me, we could never have a real life together. Your people hate my people. My people hate your people. There is no place in this world for what you are suggesting. Then we will make a place, Garrett said. He crossed the room and gently turned her to face him. I know it will be hard. I know people will talk and some will be cruel. But I have spent 3 years alone, Thraka. 3 years of empty rooms and silent meals and work with no purpose beyond survival. You have given me something to care about again, someone to care about. I am not letting that go without a fight." She looked up at him, and he saw tears glistening in her eyes. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I was trained to be a warrior, not to feel these things." "Neither do I," he admitted, "but we can figure it out together." For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Thraka reached up and touched his face, her calloused fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You are a fool, Garrett Young." "Probably," he agreed, "but I am a fool who cares about you." She smiled, and then slowly, carefully, she leaned forward and kissed him. Her tusks pressed against his cheek, an unfamiliar sensation, but her lips were soft and warm. Garrett wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, and she made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Thraka rested her forehead against his chest. "I do not know if this can work." "It will work," Garrett said. "I promise." She looked up at him, and he saw hope struggling against fear in her expression. "All right," she said, "I will stay, but if things become dangerous for you, I will leave. I will not let you be hurt because of me." "Deal," he said, and kissed her again. They spent the rest of the day together, talking and planning. Thraka agreed to stay out of sight when people from the village came by, at least until they could figure out a way to make her presence more acceptable. Garrett promised to speak with Thomas and the others, to try to convince them that Thraka was not a threat. That evening they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the wheat fields. Thraka leaned against Garrett's shoulder, and he held her hand, marveling at how natural it felt. "Tell me about orc marriage customs," he said suddenly. She looked at him in surprise. "Why do you want to know about that?" "Just curious," he said, trying to sound casual. She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Very well. Among my people, when a warrior wishes to propose, they offer something of great personal value. Often it is a weapon or a trophy from battle, but the most sacred offering is tusks." "Tusks?" "Yes. You see, our tusks are a symbol of our strength and our identity. They grow throughout our lives, and to remove them is painful and permanent. If a warrior removes their tusks and offers them to another, they are saying that they trust that person with their very self. It is the highest form of commitment." Garrett felt a chill run down his spine. "That is beautiful and terrifying." "It is both," Thraka agreed. "I have only seen it done once when I was a child. The woman who made the offering was a great warrior, and the man she proposed to wept when he accepted." "What happened to them?" "They had a long and happy life together, or so I heard. They died in battle side by side, defending their clan from a rival tribe." She paused, then added quietly, "That is how I would want to die if I had someone to die beside." Garrett squeezed her hand. "Let us focus on living first." She laughed. "You are right. I am being morbid." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Garrett felt a contentment he had not known in years, and when Thraka eventually fell asleep against his shoulder, he carefully carried her to bed and tucked her in before returning to his own spot by the fire. The next few weeks were some of the happiest of Garrett's life. Thraka threw herself into the work of the farm, and he was amazed at her strength and endurance. She could carry twice as much as he could, and she never seemed to tire. Together, they repaired fences, harvested the wheat, and expanded the vegetable garden. At night, they sat by the fire and talked, or sometimes they simply enjoyed each other's presence in silence. Thraka was teaching him words in her language, and he was teaching her to read common better. They had not kissed again since that first time, as if both were afraid of pushing too fast, but there was an undeniable closeness growing between them. Then, one afternoon, Marcus returned. He was alone this time, and he looked nervous as he dismounted and approached the house. "Garrett," he called out, "I need to talk to you." Garrett, who had been working in the garden, straightened and wiped his hands on his trousers. "What is it, Marcus?" "There is trouble coming," Marcus said. "A group of men in the village, they are planning to come out here and drive the orc away. They are talking about burning your crops if you do not hand her over." Garrett felt ice flood his veins. "When?" "Tomorrow, maybe the day after." Thomas tried to talk them down, but they would not listen. Some of them lost family in the raids, and they are not thinking straight. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know we have never been close, but you are still family. I thought you should know." "Thank you," Garrett said. "I appreciate the warning." Marcus nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "For what it is worth, I do not agree with what they are planning. But I do not know if I can stop them either. You might want to consider leaving for a while, letting things cool down." "I am not leaving my home," Garrett said flatly. Marcus sighed. "I figured you would say that. Good luck, cousin." He rode away, and Garrett stood in the garden, his mind racing. Thraka emerged from the barn, her expression questioning. "What did he want?" Garrett told her, and he watched her face harden as he spoke. When he finished, she nodded once, her jaw set. "Then I will go tonight," she said. "Before they come." "No," Garrett said. "We are not running from this." "Garrett, they are coming to burn your farm. You will lose everything because of me." "I will lose everything if you leave," he said. "Thraka, I meant what I said. I am not letting you go." "Then what do you suggest?" she demanded. "We cannot fight off a mob." "Even if I could, I will not spill the blood of your people to protect myself." "We will not fight them," Garrett said. "We will talk to them. We will make them understand." "They will not listen." "They might," he said, "if we show them who you really are. If we show them that we are not hiding, that we have nothing to be ashamed of." Thraka looked skeptical, but she nodded. "If that is what you want, I will stand with you." "Thank you," he said, and pulled her into a hug. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Garrett sharpened his tools and made sure the house was secure. Thraka cleaned her armor and weapons, though she agreed not to wear them when the men arrived. They wanted to appear peaceful, not threatening. That night, neither of them slept much. Garrett lay by the fire, listening to the sounds of Thraka moving restlessly in the next room. He knew she was afraid, though she would never admit it. He was afraid too, but he was also resolved. He would not let hatred and ignorance destroy what they had found together. The mob arrived in the late afternoon of the following day. There were about 15 men, some on horseback, others on foot. They carried torches and weapons, and their faces were hard with anger. Garrett recognized several of them: farmers, tradesmen, men he had known his whole life. He stepped out onto the porch, Thraka at his side. She stood tall and proud, her hands empty and at her sides. "Garrett Young," one of the men called out. His name was David Young, another distant cousin. "We are here to remove the orc from your property. Step aside and you will not be harmed." "She is not leaving," Garrett said, "and neither am I." "Then you are making a grave mistake," David said. "We will not allow a monster to live among us, not after what they have done." "She is not a monster," Garrett said. "Her name is Thraka, and she saved my life when I was sick last week. She has worked my fields and tended my animals. She has done nothing but try to live in peace." "She is an orc," someone shouted from the crowd. "They killed my son." "And humans killed her clan," Garrett shot back. "Where does it end? When do we stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as people?" "This is not about philosophy," David said. "This is about survival. If we let one orc stay, others will follow. Soon we will be overrun." "That is fear talking, not reason," Garrett said. "Thraka was cast out by her own people for refusing to raid. She is trying to build a new life. Why can we not let her?" "Because it is not natural," another man shouted. "Humans and orcs are not meant to live together." "Who decides what is natural?" Garrett asked. "I care about Thraka." "She cares about me." "Is that not enough?" the crowd murmured, and Garrett saw some of the faces soften. but others remained hard, unmoved by his words. Then Thraka stepped forward. "I will speak," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. The crowd fell silent, wary. Thraka took a deep breath and continued. "I understand your anger," she said. "I have seen what my people can do. I have participated in raids. I have fought humans in battle. I know the pain that war brings. But I also know that this cycle of violence will never end unless someone chooses to break it. I chose to walk away from my clan, and it cost me everything. My family, my home, my place in the world. Garrett gave me a new chance when I had nothing. He showed me that humans are capable of kindness, of mercy. If I can learn that, why can you not learn the same about orcs? Because you are the exception, not the rule," David said, but his tone was less certain. "Then let me be the first," Thraka said. "Let me prove that orcs and humans can coexist. I will not raid. I will not harm anyone. I will work and live peacefully. If I break that promise, you can drive me out then. But give me the chance to try." The crowd shifted, uncertain. Garrett could see the internal struggle on their faces. Finally, Thomas pushed forward on his horse. "I will vouch for her," he said. "If she breaks her word, I will help remove her myself. But Garrett is right. We cannot keep killing each other forever. Let us try something different." "I will vouch for her too," Marcus said, surprising everyone. "She could have killed me when she had the chance, but she did not. That counts for something." One by one, other voices joined in. Not all of them, but enough. David looked around at his fracturing mob, then sighed heavily. "All right," he said. "She can stay. But the first sign of trouble and we are coming back." "Understood, understood," Garrett said. The crowd began to disperse, some grumbling, others looking thoughtful. Thomas rode up to the porch and dismounted. "You are either very brave or very stupid," he said to Garrett. "I have not decided which yet." "Probably a bit of both," Garrett admitted. Thomas looked at Thraka. "I meant what I said. I will hold you to your word." "And I will keep it," Thraka said. Thomas nodded and rode away. Soon the yard was empty and Garrett and Thraka were alone. "That was incredible," Garrett said, pulling her into a hug. "You were incredible." "I was terrified," she admitted, her face pressed against his shoulder. "I thought they would attack." "So did I," he said. "But we did it. We made them listen." She pulled back and looked at him, her eyes shining. "What happens now?" "Now we build a life," Garrett said. "Together." She smiled and he kissed her, and for the first time he felt truly hopeful about the future. Over the following months, Thraka became a fixture on Garrett's farm. She worked tirelessly, and her efforts began to show. The crops grew better than they had in years, the animals were healthier, and the property looked more prosperous. Word spread, and slowly, cautiously, people from the village began to stop by, curious about the orc woman who lived among them. Not everyone was welcoming. There were still those who glared at Thraka when she accompanied Garrett to the village market, who muttered under their breath or made rude gestures. But there were also those who greeted her politely, who asked her questions about her life, who began to see her as more than just an orc. Thraka handled it all with quiet dignity. She never rose to insults, never responded with anger. She simply went about her business, working hard and treating everyone with respect. Garrett was proud of her, and he told her so often. Their relationship deepened as well. They shared a bed now, though they took things slowly, learning each other's bodies and boundaries. Thraka was shy at first, uncertain of how to be intimate with someone so different from her own kind. But Garrett was patient, and gradually, she relaxed. They talked about the future often. Garrett wanted to expand the farm, perhaps buy more land and hire workers. Thraka wanted to learn more about human customs and maybe teach others about orc culture. They dreamed together, planned together, and with each passing day, their bond grew stronger. Then, One evening in early autumn, Thraka came to Garrett with a strange expression on her face. "I need to tell you something," she said. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Garrett turned to her, concerned. "What is it?" She reached up and touched her tusks, a gesture he had never seen her make before. "Do you remember when I told you about orc proposals?" His heart began to race. "Yes. I have been thinking about it a great deal," she said. "About what it means, about whether I could ever do such a thing. And I have decided that I want to, if you will have me." Garrett's breath caught. "Thraka, are you saying what I think you are saying?" She nodded. "I want to marry you, Garrett Young, in the way of my people." "But your tusks," he said. "You said removing them is painful." "It is," she said, "but the pain will pass. What you and I have, that is forever, that is worth any pain." Garrett felt tears prick his eyes. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," she said, smiling through her own tears. "Yes," he said. 1,000 times yes." She stood and held out her hand. "Come with me. I want to do this now before I lose my courage." He followed her into the house, his heart pounding. Thraka went to the kitchen and retrieved a sharp knife, then sat down at the table. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Wait," Garrett said. "Let me help. You should not have to do this alone." She looked at him, and he saw gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you." Together they worked. Thraka held the knife to the base of her left tusk, and Garrett steadied her hand. It took several cuts, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out, but finally the tusk came free. Blood welled from the wound, and Garrett quickly pressed a cloth to it, applying pressure. They repeated the process with the right tusk, and by the end, Thraka was pale and shaking. Garrett cleaned and bandaged the wounds, then held her close. "You are the bravest person I have ever met," he whispered. She laughed weakly. "I do not feel brave. I feel like I might pass out." "Then let us get you to bed," he said. He helped her to the bedroom and settled her under the blankets. She reached out and took his hand. "Do not leave," she said. "I am not going anywhere," he promised. He stayed with her through the night, waking every few hours to check on her. By morning the bleeding had stopped, and though she was still in pain, she insisted on getting up. "I have something for you," she said. She retrieved the 2 tusks from where she had left them on the kitchen table, now cleaned and polished. She held them out to Garrett, her hands trembling slightly. "This is how my people propose." Garrett took the tusks, cradling them carefully. They were smooth and warm from her touch, and he could see the tiny grooves and imperfections that told the story of her life. "These are precious," he said. "I will treasure them always." "As I treasure you," she said. "Garrett Young, will you marry me?" "Yes," he said, and he pulled her into a kiss. "In every way that matters, yes." They decided to marry in the spring, giving Thraka time to heal and allowing them to plan a ceremony that honored both their traditions. Garrett spoke with the village priest, a kind man named Father Nathaniel, and explained the situation. To Garrett's relief, the priest agreed to perform the ceremony, though he admitted it would be the first time he had married a human and an orc. "Love is love," Father Nathaniel said. "And if you two are committed to each other, then who am I to stand in the way?" Word of the upcoming marriage spread through the village like wildfire. Some people were shocked, others disapproving, but many were supportive. Thomas and his wife even offered to host the reception at their home, a gesture that moved Garrett deeply. As winter turned to spring, preparations intensified. Thraka made her own wedding dress with help from a seamstress in the village, a simple but elegant gown of green and gold. Garrett bought a new suit and spent hours polishing his father's old boots. They cleaned the farmhouse from top to bottom, planted flowers in the yard, and invited everyone they knew. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Garrett woke early, too nervous to sleep. He dressed carefully, his hands shaking as he buttoned his shirt. Thraka was in the bedroom, getting ready with the help of the seamstress and a few other women from the village who had befriended her. When she finally emerged, Garrett felt his breath leave his body. She was stunning. The dress hugged her strong frame perfectly, and she had woven flowers into her braided hair. Without her tusks, her face looked different, softer, but no less beautiful. "You look amazing," he said, his voice rough. "So do you," she replied, smiling. They walked together to the village square, where Father Nathaniel was waiting. A crowd had gathered, more than Garrett had expected. He saw familiar faces, Thomas and his wife, Marcus, David, and dozens of others. To his surprise, he also saw a few orcs standing at the edge of the crowd, watching with curious eyes. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. Father Nathaniel spoke about love and commitment, about the courage it takes to bridge divides and build something new. Garrett and Thraka exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to stand by each other through hardship and joy, to honor each other's cultures and beliefs, and to build a life founded on trust and respect. When it came time to exchange rings, Garrett slipped a simple gold band onto Thraka's finger. She, in turn, gave him a ring she had forged herself from iron and silver, engraved with symbols from her clan. "With this ring, I pledge my life to yours," she said, her voice strong and clear. "From this day until my last day." "With this ring, I pledge the same," Garrett replied. "I love you, Thraka." "I love you, Garrett," she said, and they kissed to the sound of cheering from the crowd. The reception at Thomas's home was a lively affair. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and a spirit of celebration that transcended the usual divisions. Garrett watched in amazement as his neighbors laughed and talked with the orc guests, breaking bread together and sharing stories. At one point, an older orc woman approached Thraka. She wore the markings of a clan elder, and her presence commanded respect. "You are Thraka, daughter of Gruk," the woman said. It was not a question. "I am," Thraka replied, her tone wary. "I am Kara, elder of the Riverstone clan. We heard of what you have done here, of the bridge you are building between our peoples. It is bold, foolish perhaps, but bold." She paused, then smiled. "I approve. May your union bring wisdom to both our kinds." Thraka bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you, elder. Your words mean a great deal." Kara nodded and moved away, and Thraka turned to Garrett with tears in her eyes. "Did you hear that? One of the elders approves." "I heard," Garrett said, pulling her close. "This is just the beginning, love, just the beginning." As the evening wore on, Garrett and Thraka slipped away from the party and walked back to their farm. The house was quiet and welcoming, the fields bathed in moonlight. They stood on the porch, hand in hand, and looked out at the land they would work together. "Are you happy?" Garrett asked. "I am more than happy," Thraka said. "I am home." He kissed her, and they went inside, closing the door on the outside world and opening the door to their new life together. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were still those who disapproved of their marriage, who made life difficult when they could. But Garrett and Thraka faced each obstacle together, and their love only grew stronger. They expanded the farm, hired workers from both human and orc communities, and became known throughout the region as pioneers of peace. Thraka gave birth to their first child 3 years after the wedding, a healthy boy with his father's eyes and his mother's green-tinged skin. They named him Gabriel, and he was adored by everyone who met him. 2 years later, a daughter followed, fierce and curious, whom they named Lyra. The children grew up in a world that was slowly changing. More humans and orcs began to intermarry, to trade peacefully, to see each other as neighbors rather than enemies. It was not perfect, and there were setbacks, but progress was being made. Garrett often thought about the day he had found Thraka in his wheat field, bleeding and broken. He thought about the choice he had made to help her, and how that single decision had changed the course of his life. He never regretted it, not for a moment. One evening, when they were both older and their children were grown, Garrett and Thraka sat on the porch and watched the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. Thraka's hair was streaked with gray now, and Garrett's back ached more than it used to, but their love was as strong as ever. "You ever miss your tusks?" Garrett asked. It was a question he had never dared to ask before. Thraka smiled and touched the faint scars where they had once been. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at you, at our children, at the life we have built, and I know I made the right choice. My tusks were a symbol of who I was. Giving them to you was a symbol of who I wanted to become." "And who is that?" Garrett asked. "Yours," she said simply. "I wanted to be yours and you wanted to be mine. That is all that matters." He took her hand and held it, feeling the warmth of her skin, the strength in her grip. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," she replied. "Always." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The farm was quiet, the animals settled for the night, the fields ready for the next season's planting. In the distance, they could hear the laughter of their grandchildren playing in the yard, a sound full of promise and hope. Garrett thought about all the years they had shared, all the struggles and triumphs, all the moments big and small that had woven their lives together. He thought about the fear he had felt that first day, when he had knelt beside an unconscious orc woman and made the choice to save her. He thought about the courage it had taken for Thraka to remove her tusks, to trust him with the most sacred part of herself. And he thought about love, that strange and powerful force that could bridge any divide, overcome any obstacle, and turn two unlikely people into a family. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Garrett leaned over and kissed Thraka's cheek. She turned to him and smiled, that same smile that had first captured his heart all those years ago. "What was that for?" she asked. "Just because," he said. "Just because I can." She laughed, a sound like music, and rested her head on his shoulder. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the night unfold. Two souls united by choice, by love, and by the shared belief that a better world was possible in the end. That was all they had ever needed. Each other, and the courage to believe in something more. The farmhouse stood solid and warm behind them, a testament to what they had built together. The fields stretched out in every direction, fertile and green. And somewhere in the distance, the laughter of children continued, a promise that their legacy would endure long after they were gone. Garrett squeezed Thraka's hand, and she squeezed back. Words were unnecessary. They had said everything that needed to be said 1,000 times over, in 1,000 different ways. Now, in the twilight of their lives, they simply existed together, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. They had found home. They had found love. And in a world that had tried so hard to keep them apart, they had found a way to be together. That was enough. That was everything. As the moon rose over the farm, casting silver light across the fields, Garrett and Thraka remained on the porch, two figures in the darkness, holding onto each other and the life they had created. The night was peaceful, the air was warm, and the future stretched out before them, full of possibility. They had started with nothing but hope and determination. They had faced hatred, fear, and countless obstacles. But they had persevered, and in doing so, they had changed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. Their story would be told for generations, a tale of courage and love that transcended boundaries. Children would hear about the human farmer and the orc warrior who dared to dream of a different world, who risked everything for the chance to be together. And in those stories, the lesson would be clear. Love is stronger than hate, compassion is stronger than fear, and even the most unlikely unions can create something beautiful. Garrett and Thraka had proven that. They had lived it, every single day of their lives together. And as they sat on that porch, hand in hand, they knew that their journey had been worth every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, because they had each other. And that made all the difference. The night deepened, and eventually they rose from the porch and went inside. The house welcomed them with familiar warmth, and they moved through the rooms with the easy comfort of long habit. In the bedroom, they prepared for sleep, helping each other in the small ways that spoke of deep intimacy and care. As they lay in bed, Thraka turned to Garrett one last time. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me," she said. "For choosing me. For giving me a life I never thought I could have." "I should be thanking you," Garrett replied. "You gave me everything: purpose, love, a family. You made me brave enough to stand up for what I believed in." "We made each other brave," Thraka said. "That is what love does." He pulled her close, and they fell asleep in each other's arms just as they had done for decades. Outside, the farm slept too, peaceful and secure. The animals dozed in their pens, the crops swayed gently in the night breeze, and the stars wheeled slowly overhead. It was a perfect ending to a perfect day, and the beginning of yet another tomorrow filled with possibility. For Garrett and Thraka, every day was a gift, every moment together a treasure. They had learned long ago not to take anything for granted, to cherish what they had while they had it, and so they did. Until the very end and beyond, their love endured. A testament to what two people can accomplish when they refuse to let the world dictate their choices, when they choose each other over fear, and when they build a life on the foundation of trust, respect, and unwavering commitment. Their story was one for the ages. And it all began with a simple act of kindness, a moment of compassion in a wheat field when a human man looked at an orc woman and saw not a monster, but a person in need of help. Everything else followed from that single choice, and it changed the world. The end of their individual stories was, in truth, just the beginning of something much larger. Their children carried forward their legacy, as did their children's children. The farm remained in the family for generations, a symbol of what had been achieved and a reminder of what was possible. And in the village of Millbrook, and in the orc settlements nearby, people told the story of Garrett and Thraka. They told it to their children, who told it to theirs, and with each telling, the message grew stronger. That love knows no boundaries, that courage can change the world, and that even the deepest divides can be bridged by those willing to try. It was a story of hope in dark times, of light in the midst of shadow, and it would never be forgotten. Garrett Young and Thraka, daughter of Gruk, had lived their lives with integrity, compassion, and fierce devotion to each other. They had faced every challenge together, celebrated every victory together, and grown old together. They had built something lasting and true, something that would endure long after they were gone, and in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. A life well lived, a love deeply felt, and a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Their farmhouse still stood, weathered but strong, a monument to their determination. The field still produced abundant harvests, tended by their descendants. And on warm summer evenings, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of their laughter on the breeze, a reminder that they were never truly gone. They lived on in the stories, in the memories, and in the hearts of all who had known them. And their message remained as relevant as ever, that in a world often divided by fear and hatred, love and compassion will always find a way. That was the legacy of Garrett and Thraka. That was the gift they gave to the world. And it was a gift that would never stop giving, as long as there were people willing to listen, to learn, and to open their hearts to the possibility of something better. Their journey had been long and difficult, but it had been worth every step. They had found each other against all odds, and together they had built a life that proved anything was possible. And so their story ended, not with sadness but with joy, not with regret but with gratitude, not with an ending but with the promise of new beginnings for all those who came after. For Garrett and Thraka had shown the way. All anyone had to do was have the courage to follow. The moon continued its journey across the sky, the stars continued to shine, and the farm rested peacefully in the darkness. Inside the house, two souls slept, content and complete, knowing that they had lived fully and loved deeply. And somewhere in the distance, the next generation was already beginning their own stories, carrying forward the lessons learned and the love shared. The cycle continued, as it always would, each generation building on the foundation laid by those who came before. Garrett and Thraka's story was finished, but their impact would last forever. They had changed hearts and minds, broken down barriers, and created a path for others to follow. They had proven that love was stronger than hate, that understanding was stronger than fear, and that two people who dared to dream could change the world. That was their triumph. That was their victory, and it would never be forgotten. The night drew on toward dawn, and with it came the promise of a new day. The farm would wake with the sun, as it always did, and life would continue. But now it continued with hope, with possibility, and with the knowledge that anything was achievable if you were willing to fight for it. Garrett and Thraka had fought for their love, for their life together, and for the future they wanted to create. They had won that fight, and in doing so, they had won something much greater. They had won the chance to live freely, to love openly, and to build a world where others like them would not have to struggle as they had struggled. They had paved the way for change, and that change was already taking root. As the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, the farmhouse remained peaceful. Inside, Garrett and Thraka slept on, secure in the knowledge that they had done everything they set out to do. They had lived with purpose, loved with passion, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask for? The sun rose, golden and warm, bathing the farm in light. The animals stirred and began their morning routines. The fields waited patiently for the day's work to begin. And in the village, people woke to face another day, each of them carrying a piece of Garrett and Thraka's legacy in their hearts. The story had reached its conclusion, but the impact would never end. Love never truly ends. It echoes through time, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen, creating ripples that spread far and wide. Garrett and Thraka had created those ripples. They had thrown a stone into the pond of history, and the waves were still spreading, still reaching new shores, still changing the landscape. Their love story was complete. Their life together was fulfilled, and their legacy would endure for all time. That was the truth of their journey. That was the gift of their lives, and it would live on forever, a beacon of hope for anyone who needed to believe that love could conquer all. The farm stood in the morning light, beautiful and serene. The crops swayed in the gentle breeze. The animals grazed peacefully. And somewhere in the house, Garrett and Thraka continued to sleep, dreaming perhaps of the life they had built and the love they had shared. It was a perfect moment, a perfect ending, and the perfect beginning of everything that would come after. And so the story closed, not with sadness but with celebration, not with loss but with abundance, not with an end but with the eternal promise of love that never dies. Garrett and Thraka had shown the way. Their story was complete, and the world was better for having known them.